Marshal of any place you're turning. Okay. Typical velo promo trick. If there are orange cones.
Hey cycling community, this is Steve Grusis, the Cycling Greek. This is one tough 65-mile race. Ordinarily, the 65 plus categories would not be doing this long a race. We'd be doing 45 to 50 miles. But this is one long loop, so this is what we got to do. Along with the distance for us old guys, another factor that made it tough was it had 3 sections of gravel. This particular section is about 1.3 miles long. In my few previous encounters with gravel during races, I did not fare well. For this race, I prepared as best as I could. I tried 28s, but my bike just wouldn't fit in the 28s, so I went to 25s. In my previous races, I had 23s. The 25s did better, and because of that, I did better. Coming into the gravel, I didn't know what to expect, so I kind of figured I'll sit in the back and ride wheels and see what happens. Well, they're sliding around, there's people sliding around in front of me. I'm starting to think, what if somebody slides in front of me and causes me to slow down or to stop? That'll totally suck in this section. I therefore quickly determined I didn't want anybody in front of me. I also quickly determined that desire versus the ability to do it are two different things, so it took a while for me to accomplish that. Thankfully, I finally did. This was one situation where I didn't mind being in the front for a long time. Once I finally made that turn on the pavement, I took a bit of a jump to take a look at what's behind me, and then I quickly pulled off because only 10% of the race was done. The next section of note on this course came just a couple miles later. More gravel, this time 1.7 miles of it. And this time the gravel was a little deeper. I'm sliding. People in front of me are starting to slide. I again don't want to be anywhere near them. I look for what appears to be a good line, and it's more deep gravel, or with what I'm going through now, deep fine dirt. Looking at the rear camera insert, you'll see that Linda, who is the only person in the 55 plus women's, and that's the reason why she was combined with us, has fallen off the pace a bit. And so are some of the others right now. Now, Linda's experiencing with one of my fears, is that as I get older, I still want to compete. I want to compete against quality people, and that there's going to be no one to compete against. That being stated, this race has been around for years, so people probably are staying away from it because they know how tough it is. Looking back through the front camera, you'll see a rider up ahead. That is George Coffey from Revs Racing. He led into the section and then just kept going. His intent was not to do a breakaway, but he just kept powering and established some distance. Now, I am thinking about going after him, but I'm really not. There's still a lot of ways to go. There's that big climb coming up. I don't know how he climbs, so I'm just keeping my pace. Now, see in the insert and rear camera, I've got some distance, but I'm not looking behind me. I don't know what's going on behind me. All I'm doing is concentrating on just keeping up my pace, and if I can get a little real estate back from George, great. Now, I'm sure the others in back of me are thinking, at least this is what I would be thinking, is that I don't want this guy to get up there with George. So they're now working on closing the gap. All the while, I'm just totally ignorant about what's going on at the moment. Jumping forward a bit, 3 riders bridged up to me. My buddy Bob Gorman, one of the 2 riders from Victory Velo Racing, and those guys had to watch because they had a team of 2, everyone else was individual riders, and Brian Patterson, who lives about an hour south of me. He just started racing this year. In fact, I think this is his 3rd race, and I am trying to get him onto my team. Having another old guy teammate who races would be great. Once we leave this gravel section, there's only a little bit of rest for us, because we're now starting on the first major climb. Now, this first climb I think is around 4 miles, in which the first 2 miles is going to be a lower grade, kind of undulation-like, but then it gets pretty steep on the last 2 miles. What you're seeing on the screen right now is just a little foreshadowing bump. Jumping forward a bit, we all reconnected. Those of us in the front were not interested in going fast at all. We were just conserving because we know what's coming up. Now, I mentioned previously that there are 2 members from the Victory Velo race team. One of the guys is pulling off the front. Their other guy is just riding wheels. He's not going to pull if this other guy pulls, if Brian, who's in front, pulls off to let him pull. So this is what makes me nervous. I'm thinking about what those guys are thinking about me when I was in the gravel section. If that guy connects with George, who's way up ahead, then it could be lights out for the rest of us in terms of top podium results. So I spend a little bit of energy and I jump up to him and then I just sit on his wheel. And that actually presents the first question of the day. Should I have done that? This is a long road race and it has an accumulating effect, and you'll see the effects of that accumulated fatigue later on in the race. I have now jumped to the start of the consistent climbing. The previous 3.5 miles was also climbing, but it also had numerous flat sections in it. This was going to last a little over 3 miles, and the closer we got to the crest, the steeper it was going to get. I want you to keep your eye now on the rider in the yellow jersey there. That's my new buddy that I was talking about from that lives about an hour south of me. That's Brian. Later on that evening, we were texting back and forth about climbing, which is why I brought him into focus at this part of the video. Brian has a deep athletic background, originally focused on soccer. He has abilities that I wish I had. He can go on the flats and go strong for a long period of time. He's the type of rider that if he gets dropped early in the race on a climb or something, that 40 miles later, he can catch up to you solo. He was telling me that he was riding just above threshold, and his basic question was, how can he last longer with the group on the climbs? In his case, and I'm sure in other people's cases too, it would be a case of getting the muscles used to that new type of action. After that, it would be experience. The practice portion would be, of course, just going out and doing it on group rides, doing solo intervals, and focusing not only on going up fast, but also on your technique, adapting the body to full circle spinning while at speed, and of course being able to maintain that for a longer period of time. Now the experience part, those can be little tricks that you pick up along the way that are more akin to your gifts. For example, it could be that to take pressure off of your muscles that you do some standing, and then you sit back down after that starts to bog you down a bit. While I do a little bit of that, the main thing that I rely on is riding what I call the fine line between aerobic and anaerobic death. That's where I'm spinning high cadence until I start to redline, and then I go to a bigger gear and I rely mostly on my muscles. And when those start to bog down, then I'll switch back to that high cadence spin again. I keep doing this until I hopefully get to the crest with everyone else. Remember, those are just tricks. You gotta put saddle time in on the climbs. Jumping forward to half a mile to go to the climb, I am still with these guys. I am too focused and too on the edge to be pleasantly surprised. I am just waiting for the top. I've got to stay with these guys all the way to the top, because if I don't, then this race just turns ugly for me. The Victory Velo rider has been yo-yoing off the back. My buddy Bob is in front of me, and leading us up the climb is John Elgart, age 75. I have not had the need nor the ability to go to the front and push the pace. To better describe how on the edge I am at this point, I carried an extra water bottle with me because of the heat and the length of the race and not knowing if there was going to be water at the water stop, much less having anybody to be able to hand it off to me. I was thinking about carrying 2 extra water bottles. I am confident that if I carried that second water bottle, that I would not have been able to hang with these guys over the top. Once I got to the top with the group, I realized I had made a key selection. There are 4 of us, and we were still chasing that one person from Revs, George, who was still out there. Even though it got a little respite by having a little bit of a downhill, I knew there was still 40 miles to go, over 40 miles to go. About 2 kilometers later, we caught up to George. And I was speaking to George after the race, and he told me on the second gravel section, he went to it with a little bit of a lead, and then just kept rolling and saw that the lead was growing, so he just kept at it. When he was doing the climbing, he was climbing at his own pace because he had a pretty good gap by the time he got to the climb before we did. So he was using a lot less energy to go up that climb, certainly than I was. Whether it was an opportunity made or an opportunity presented, he did a good move. A mile later, we started our last section of gravel, and this was a long one. This was going 3.8 miles. It was sprinkled with washboard, and while there were sections of semi-deep gravel, overall it was not that bad. Again, because of my comfort level with gravel, or rather lack of it, I took the lead, and I led through most of the section. Although when we were approaching the other side, some of the others took the lead, and I was happy with that because the gravel wasn't that bad. We are at 28 miles plus some change. We are on the plateau between the climbs. It is here where we lose our first rider. The Victor Velo rider had some sort of mechanical. Flat, I couldn't quite tell, but he pulled off, and that's the last that we had seen of him. Jumping forward quite a bit, we just left a small flat section that we stepped up to from a small climb, and we're starting a longer climb. We are still in the upper plateau section. The reason why you're seeing my rear camera is because my camera in the front has run out of batteries and my camera on my helmet has run out of battery too. I believe the feed zone is around mile 44, and that's at the start of the third climb, so we have a ways to go for that. I'm still feeling strong, and I figure that these three are the riders that are with me, that we're all going to go to the line. I guess feeling strong is relative, because right now I'm thinking as we jump forward on this climb that I'm starting to get pretty tired, and that I'm hoping I get to the top with these guys. I don't want to get dropped. You'll notice George is right behind me, and right behind him is my buddy Bob. You know what that means? 75-year-old John is pulling us at the front and making me wish that this climb was over. After 4.5 minutes, we finally reach the top. I get a little bit of a rest. We all actually get a little bit of a rest. I begin to notice some small feelings of pain in my right calf and in my quad. Nothing debilitating yet, but we still have a lot of racing to do, and we still have one more climb. Not only that, I'm not looking to finish. I'm looking to win, and to be able to do that against these guys is going to take 2 good legs, and I'm fearing that I'm going to end up with about 1. Jumping forward a few miles, we're finally at the feed zone hill. After this, we're going to have a long descent which will take us off the plateau and put us back on the flatlands. But I need to get to the top with these guys. So John, of course, 75-year-old John, is at the front and he's pulling us. I grabbed a bottle, and what I did was take a bunch in because I still had water with me. Remember, I had 3 water bottles. I drank a bunch, and then I poured a bunch on my head. And then what I did was, what you see there, I tossed the water bottle back, and hopefully those guys saw that. If they didn't, then that's my bad right there. Doing that caused me to gap myself a little bit from those 2 other guys, from Bob and from John. So I had to do a bunch of standing in pieces to get back up to them. In other words, I would stand, get a little distance back, and sit down when I started to bog down a bit, spin, and then do some more standing to get some more distance back. And eventually, I happened to catch them as they crested. I then took the lead on that long downhill. I never touched the brakes. I think I only touched the brakes once. I don't know if I was to the others, but I felt like I was flying downhill. And in the back of my mind, I was hoping that they were skittish, at least a couple of them were skittish, that they would keep it slow and I can get a little distance on them or get somebody to go with me, and then we'd have maybe a 2-man break, that type of thing. Sounded good in my head, but that wasn't to be. So once we descended and we're on the flats, things are really starting to go bad for me. I am on the edge of cramping. I'm on the edge of cramping in my right leg and in my right calf. I also have significant pain in my right quad. And I have to be careful that I don't get significant pain in my right calf. All this is coming from the workload. My body just isn't used to that workload that I'm putting it under. And the reason why I'm putting it under a lot of workload is that I want to stay with these guys because I want to have a chance for a win at the end. You may recall from my previous videos, I've been working on end of race strength, and I've been doing specific things for that, and it's been helping because if in 45-mile races I would die off at let's say 30-35 miles and wouldn't be able to hang with the front people for whatever was going on. And now I'm at the 45-mile mark of this tough race, so improvements. Jumping forward to about the last 8 miles of the race, all flat. We're all hurting to various degrees. And you pretty much know that I'm hurting pretty bad, but worse than me is John. John is cramping a lot, and he's not going to be with us very long right now. In fact, right now he's just got to stop pedaling for a bit to be able to get some leg back. And that is my biggest fear at the moment, getting dropped and then getting caught by somebody from behind. Right now I have a minimum of 3rd place. I keep looking behind me every so often. Well, I'm not familiar with the strengths and weaknesses of those other riders. I am familiar a bit with Brian, and he's somebody that can just motor along the flats and then catch us, or catch me if I've fallen off the back. I also started, well before this point, looking down at my odometer and thinking, shouldn't this race be over by now? And then I remember that this promoter always uses miles that are longer than the normal miles. So I'm now looking way ahead to see if I can see the finishing stand. It's hard to find words to describe how happy and relieved I was when I saw the 1K to go sign. The sign that you're seeing now is the 200 meter to go sign. We've started our sprint. I'm still thinking I could beat these guys. At least I thought I could beat them as we got to the 200 sign to go, but these guys just took off in my legs. I just had one leg really that I could spin with. Still, this is my best placing in years, and I decided right at that moment I'm going to nationals. And the benefit of doing this course is that it has 3 climbs of similar length and grade as those that are in nationals. The advantage is that the race in nationals is only going to be 32 miles. After the race, I could barely walk and I could barely hold myself up straight. It took a while before my right leg could be at least semi-ambulatory. What my performance showed me is that my training plan is working, that the people I train with are of great value to me, and that at nationals I have a chance of being in the mix. I hope you enjoyed this video and you got something out of it. Always remember, comment, like, subscribe. The Cycling Greek.